This is AV SuperFriends Off the Rails, an almost regularly scheduled open discussion on audio and video in higher education. We'll sound off about our most brilliant ideas, our dumbest mistakes, and everything in between. And because this conversation will almost certainly go off the rails at some point, we'll end up covering just about everything else. And now, the AV SuperFriends. For October 23rd, 2020, it's the AV SuperFriends Off the Rails. On today's show, we'll fight about what a standard classroom AV system is, and we'll dig through the mailbag to answer your questions. So I'm joined today by Larry, Justin, Mark, Jamie, and Rachel, and my name is Chris, and we are going to hammer out some things about what a standard classroom is and what that means. But first, we do have a quick follow-up to last week's discussion on AV over IP. As it turns out, Mark, who is putting in an AV over IP system right now, had an interesting experience with an integrator. Mark?
Yeah, so we've all had these projects, and the only way I can really explain is if you're gotten to a project and you're in that final closeout and you think things are going to go really well, you have cool expectations, you show up, and by the time you're all done, you feel like you were shot at and missed and shit at and hit. That was basically what happened to me this week. We had a project that started, I don't know, back in the middle of the COVID dark ages back in like April or May. And we obviously lost all of our boots on the ground and we had to farm this out. And it's an active learning classroom, 7 pods, a couple large displays in the room, had a base infrastructure package we put in, and it was co-dealt with by Low Voltage, who then hired a sub in. And things kind of went sideways at that point. I'm sure flags are already raising. People are already like, oh my God, what's going on? And our standard package for digital displays, and we see them on a wall in direct views, always calls for in the network 2 network drops, right? We always have 2 there. And then wherever you see a display, we have 2 network drops. And so that made the package, but then there was a whole subset of documents that came out. It was just for AV infrastructure on this. And the Low Voltage sub, who then subbed it to the other contractor, failed to provide that additional set of documentation to them. So fast forward, into the summer here, early fall. Cool thing. Don't really hear much from the contractor. They say, yeah, we're done. Snap some pictures. Seems like it's looking great. I'm like, wow, we see some of the things online. So cool. It sounds like they got it just about right. So we go 45 minutes off site. We drive to the new location, new campus, get there. It's like, well, I'm probably going to have to repatch some network cables. We'll see what's going on, and we'll hopefully get all this stuff online. Programmers ready, standing by. Show up in the room, unhook one display, peek in the back, and at that moment, I knew that shit was going sideways, because the moment I unlatched that display, I had 2 endpoints, a power conditioner, and a small switch fall out of the bottom of that display onto the ground, accompanying all of the cables with it in connectivity. And then I realized, okay, I'm going to need help. Somebody help me take this display down, and let's see what the hell is going on back here. And then I found out.
I just want to know who put that up and thought, yeah, that seems right.
So is all of that supposed to go behind the display, or is they just tuck
there's
it
a back box back there.
So that was okay. All right.
But none of it was attached to anything. There was nothing dressing.
So they
any
installed
of it.
using the hopes and dreams method.
Yeah.
So like when you finish building a piece of IKEA furniture and you find a bunch of leftover parts and you just hide them in the back.
Yeah,
that's what it was, right? So it's all, like the crossbars on your display on your mount, like they had stuff just like sitting on the bars, right? It wasn't even zip tied or anything. No Velcro, nothing. It's just
we call that gravity mounting.
They wired it with a shovel.
Like, look at the cable, look at the device, look at the cable, look at the device.
And so
set
at that point,
down,
I'm like,
back away slowly.
Yeah. I'm like, okay, well, I got to find out what's going on with the infrastructure on here. Like, what in the hell is going on? So I look, and I only see the 2 standard network ports going back to the IDF closet. And I'm like, well, shit. That was all the flags start going off. And all the other layer 1 was totally gone. It was never even pulled into the space whatsoever. So they just hung everything off of the network and never provided a network of any other kind. And we started kind of unpacking as to why did this happen. And the sub, because the original Low Voltage contractor had that piece in there, they thought that, well, those 2 ports that were there must be the 2 that I needed for my my AV network, so therefore I don't have to pull in any additional lines. And so the moral of the story is how many times have we been on projects when you have traditional telecom or network and you look at documents and they see, okay, there's your standard package. And then AV gets there and it's often interpreted as, oh, that's redundant and we don't need that. That's duplication. So strike that out. And you show up, as I did, on to the project to find out all my infrastructure has been kind of VE'd out of the project because they thought it was redundant. And so moral of the story is there's a contractor coming back to blow a hole in the wall to add a new conduit because all of the existing conduits are already full to like 90%, and they're going to provide more cable for a whole new layer 1 for an active learning classroom, which we thought would have been delivered this week. Turns out it is not. So get your divisions correct. Make sure your documents are in line, and don't let COVID happen to you so you can be on site.
That's weird.
What we have here is a failure to communicate.
Most of our problems, though, is it's like everything's notated. It's a data duplex, right? There's two. And anywhere, that's just our spec, right? It's in the divisions. It's on the plans. Even the little stupid triangles colored the same way, right? For two, everywhere. And the architects go through and say,
all my triangles are colored black.
They just, that just means one. No, it doesn't. It means two. It's always meant two. No, it just means one. I think I'm more cracked up because, I usually find the, what did Chris call it? The gravity method of installation. And it's not always the subcontractor, right? Where it's like,
well, I just got into a situation where the architect put triangles where they wanted power. So we started asking, why does
it's all PoE these days, Justin? What the hell?
PoE why does the dishwasher in the kitchen and the meat cutters need data? Like, are you providing metrics from these meat cutters to the students to figure out how many meat slices they eat?
That almost sounds like somebody
started asking questions.
I'm sure that somebody is literally doing that.
And there's a card swipe on it too, so that you're only allocated 42 pieces of ham, and you had 43.
So I was fine with everything, right? And then all of a sudden, they wrote back saying, "You guys are silly. No, that's just power." Like talking to us like we did something wrong. No, you interpreted our drawings wrong. No, stop putting triangles where you want power.
But they're architecture in a big city,
right? So, yeah.
So the other bad part of this whole story, as if it couldn't be any worse, was when we looked at the contract for the sub that came in. We pulled that out of like contingency COVID response funds because we couldn't physically do it. And when we looked at the raw number on what we paid, we effectively paid a subcontractor tens of thousands of dollars to just unbox a bunch of equipment and then throw the shit in the back boxes and not actually configure anything. And now we get to go back in and pay ourselves to undo it all and put it back together. Now, it'd be nice if they took the cardboard boxes out, but they didn't. They saved them all for us in a storage room with all the packing materials. So we literally paid them to just unbox the stuff and then stick it in the wall, and that's it. And so,
how do I get on that?
I was going to say, I've got some free weekends available.
I know.
Yeah.
Because that could probably even cover my flight, right? My hotel.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if any of you have run into something similar to that, where a couple steps prior and on a project, we often, and it's not all the projects, but a lot of ones, because the AV group is part of IT and the networking data group is part of IT. And so they will invite people to these project meetings early in the schematic design, early in the programming sort of thing. But they will invite one or the other, assuming that this person speaks for both groups. And so they'll say, well, we talked to IT. They're doing this. I said, yeah, you talked to the data guys. I need all this stuff. Or they'll say, hey, here's all your AV conduits exactly where you want it. I'm like, well, there should be a bunch of data ports in here too. Where's the IT stuff? Well, no, you're the who, but the man said, this has happened multiple times with multiple emails with VPs on the email chain, all the way up to like the VP of facilities involved. And it keeps happening because of this general misconception of, well, you're IT and they're IT and everyone's IT together, so get your it together sort of thing.
We've had that same problem, and we started combining the data and AV drawings to one CAD, and I'm actually the one that does that for WKU.
Well, and that's fine. Commercially, that happens all the time. You have a telecom draft that has AV and security and low voltage and intercom systems, and it's all on there. That's fine. Yeah. as long as they can actually count, well, this says 9 data ports. Well, we'll give them 4. It's like, no, these all get used for something different.
Ours runs into
these are
computers.
like the America's worst chefs of integrators who are looking at the recipe and going, it can't possibly be that.
A lot of that, to me, and my experience with integrators is just the way they work, right? They send somebody on site. Their bosses tell them to do X, Y, and Z, and they're paying them A, B, and C. And if the workers stayed there longer, they would be in trouble. So then the bosses are on their asses, come back to the office. We've fired a lot of integrators because they would travel from Louisville and Nashville. They would leave our campus, no matter if the work's done or not, to get back home to their families by 4 to 5 o'clock. And that's an hour and a half travel time. And so we're only paying them for 4 to 5 hours of work a day, and they're charging us for 8.
Yep.
Yeah. That's actually
we knew that down
time
to
piece.
improper incentives.
Yep, that whole thing. It's just, I don't know. It's fascinating to see it happen. I'm sure it happens everywhere. But what are you going to do? We live and learn.
So the
other thing you see on that is that how many times have you called out, like, okay, I need 6 data here, but 3 of it's point to point and doesn't go to the IDF. But when you show up, it all goes to the IDF, no matter what, because the contractor, well, I just pulled data. I assumed everything terminates to the IDF, MDF. And it's like, well, no, if you read your drawing, you can see it's point to point. Oh, well, that's a change order. It's like, well, no, it's not. It's actually as it's drawn. So,
yeah, we had something similar here on campus that happened last year over spring break. Another group on campus, building-wide Dante system. And because it's a separate group, like we were giving them some guidelines of what we do and say, okay, this is our VLAN, this is where you put the controllers, and then you need to come up with your own ports and drops for your Dante devices. They came in, the text they sent, saw the ports, didn't specify any additional points for theirs, plugged into that. We come in on Monday of spring break, and half of the touch panels across campus are offline because all of a sudden they got a ton of multicast traffic they weren't expecting. And we're all scrambling, trying to figure out why is the control systems across campus all failing at the same moment. It was just
perfect
nuts.
storm.
Your touch panels aren't Dante compatible?
That's a little bit of that whole like last person there, right? The last trade gets screwed. It all trickles down to them. I mean, we've walked in and we've seen our AV infrastructure taken by Telcom, the other side of the story, right? It's like, wait, that's not yours. That's mine. Why is your WAP strung all the way across down here into my port?
Do you guys routinely do box walks on projects to catch stuff like that early? I'm just curious if that's
we try to when we're not locked down from COVID.
We try really hard to. We don't always get in
on site.
Like, we don't even know. It's just kind of like, oh yeah, we had our in-wall inspections and gypsum's up. What? And then by then,
the IT department was here. Yeah.
Yeah, IT's already been here. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, except that guy walks with me. He's like, what are you talking about? Our conflict is between, like, our network and our AV. We're all tied closely together. We share the same office, right? And so that's never the problem. Our problem is with computer people, the desktop support. And we go to these meetings, and then all of a sudden we need you to provide a whole computer lab with 4 printers. I'm like, no. Why not? Because I don't do computers.
I'm sorry, your princess is in another castle.
Yeah, I'm like, I'll tell you what, I'll take this note, and I'll tell you that you can't afford it, and then I'll pass you on to the right person.
I thought you were going to say what they can do with their note.
Do you all have IT project managers? Because we have an IT project manager. That
you're looking at them.
All of the stuff to IT, and then we have an AV project manager inside the AV division.
We have 6. We have 6 IT generic, so they have AV network, so they split them. We have 6 project managers. I feed them everything they need to know, and we see what happens. I give them the Gants, I give them the product sheets, I give them the contacts, I give them. So really, it's whatever I give them, they manipulate well. It's when they I'm about to get super fired is what I'm about to get.
Yeah, you may want to back off there.
But it's just one of those things where we do a lot of it.
On that note, let's kind of, this is an ongoing issue that sounds like we're all familiar with. So Mark, best of luck to you on that project, and hopefully that'll turn out well for you. And
just put it on the network.
It's super fired. Just put it all on the network. It's fine.
It is.
Well, actually, so what you should do is move your AV to wireless, because it's all wireless these days. Much easier.
Yeah.
I can send you some network guys up there to make it work on the network.
If it all worked on the network, it'd be great. It's just that this one, it's just the perfect storm.
Not so much.
Of
we
pandemic.
Can just force it.
Unless you have Larry's Dante enabled touch panels, it's probably not going to work for you. So
that's probably coming up in the commercial break.
Speaking of which, let's take a quick break.
The AV Super Friends virtual live tour will be headed to Ed Spaces 2020 this November. Ed Spaces is a conference where architects, consultants, and technology managers gather to discuss what is trending or may soon be trending in educational space design. This year, Avixa encouraged Ed Spaces to invite our brand of dysfunction to their party, and you're not going to want to miss out on that. So head over to ed-spaces.com, that's ed-spaces, ed-spaces.com, and register to hear what the AV Super Friends will bring to the table and see if we end up ruffling a few feathers while we're there.
All right, well, welcome back. So the topic for today is going to be discussing kind of a standard classroom build-out or standard AV system for a classroom or learning space. And we started talking earlier in a kind of in via email and planning for this, and realized that this is going to be a little more difficult to define than we initially thought. So I'm going to add some parameters to this discussion just at the beginning. So I'm going to first phrase the question for everybody. What is a standard classroom at your school? But I'm going to throw a whole bunch of caveats here. So I'm talking about your cookie cutter, generic, non-departmental, your registrar schedule, general inventory, building by the dozen, fleet of standardized, deliberate, planned, modern learning spaces, regardless of who's using it from which school or department. And I'm not talking about your crazy, weird, one-off, specialized, wackadoo. We already bought this TV at Best Buy. Why can't we use it? We don't need audio in here. Shoestring budget held together by duct tape and baling wire classrooms.
But it's Bose.
Those don't count. Everybody has lots of those. So we're focusing more on kind of the standard thing. Now, this discussion, as part of it, is going to lead into things talking about technology lifespan, funding and support model, refresh cycles, total cost of ownership, general IT organizational model. We're going to go all over the place on this one. But I'm just kind of curious, what's a standard classroom mean to you at your school? If someone says, hey, we're doing a new building and we need 15 standard classrooms, what's that look like?
Well, standards. I will start. We'll just draw the short straw here, I guess. I wish there were just one, right? We do have probably 4 or 5 go-to standards that we do. The high 30,000-foot view of our standard is we provide an installed computer. We provide a BYOD connection. Typically, it has an HDMI connector. We have a document camera visualizer. We may or may not have a wireless presentation source available on there, and we have a ADA output and a installed microphone base package, right? Then it obviously comes complete with whatever the appropriate sized single display or multiple displays as those standards shift up. That is like the real basic piece that we provide as a standard service offering within a classroom space, and we can mix and match from all of that stuff. But I think for the most part, the bulk of our fleet from our general purpose registrard, controlled and scheduled spaces, single display. We do have a fair amount of double display in there, but it's single with those basic source packages, and simple switching that's our 90% of our campus. What about you, Jamie? Where does your standard sit?
Yeah, we're about the same. We do have we have tiered options, right? But the one that everybody's very familiar with, the classic cookie cutter 30 to 70 seatish, right? Thereabouts. Usually single presentation display projection. And we've taken it where we've even made it so a few years ago it was like it will be a laser projector, period, end of statement. We don't care if it saves you money to buy a lamp or not. Doesn't matter. With the audio system, we made it very clear years ago, 6-7 years ago, it'd be a DSP with echo cancellation and a USB, wireless mic, desk mic, IOs for other stuff, audio IOs, mostly so we can put in the assisted listening if needed. And then we still, the normal document camera, we put a PC in every one of these systems. We have a Dell PC that goes in there because we don't have a program where everybody's issued one. When I came from Northwest Missouri State, they did. Everybody got a computer, so we didn't have to. But at UMKC, that's not the case as far as laptops. So there's a PC in every one of those. With all the UC capabilities, we started doing that when Chris was there, 7 years ago. We said, no way, this is going to happen. So we're going to put in cameras, a single camera. It's not the most wonderful thing. It was those Panasonic HE2s, right? I mean, good enough. It's adequate. Basically, that's the premise. It's adequate for a normal thing. We still put in a disc player. We put a Blu-ray. Now it's Blu-ray. Before it was a DVD or a DVD VHS. We still put in a physical media player. And we can't find a great reason to get rid of them yet. We still have a vast number of instructors that really, they still have a disc. And it may be from 1994, but they have one. And they want to play it. And they don't want to turn on the computer. And what we found is that Windows is getting increasingly more difficult to play discs on.
Well, and in the larger scheme of things, a simple Blu-ray player is relatively inexpensive to do. So, it solves a lot of issues.
So we just put it in.
Increase the control.
A little bit. We're an Extron. We do mostly Extron. I mean, we have some Crestron. We're trying to get rid of AMX. And now this is old AMX, right? This is Panja stuff that is needed to go because, it's that old that it's failing anyway. And so, but we're mostly Extron, and the drag and drop for it helps us out on keeping that going as far as the programming goes. We don't have to have anybody there. But that's our standard kit. And it runs us about $28,000, and off we run. But we tried to focus on making the same experience everywhere, and we also tried to focus on making sure that at any single point in time, UC became popular. Like today, it was there and was ready to. it was ready just to fire up, and we made that decision a long time ago. Chris and I spent a lot of time. Going through, and another designer we had there at the time, we went, a year, 2 years? And we had massive shootouts of what we were going to do. And when we settled on it, there's really no deviation unless it's special. But we're not talking about special today.
So, Jamie, what you just described is a special classroom for us. Our standard is, and with this obviously scales, and we do try to focus on the standardized experience, right? So our basic 30-foot by 30-foot classroom that holds 25, 30, whatever people, single display, auxiliary HDMI connection, lectern with a computer, hopefully an audio speaker system, definitely no microphone, definitely no DSP, definitely no document camera, and no camera. And for any
Did you say hopefully an audio system?
Hopefully an audio system. And that's really based upon how we're funded, right? So that gets into a whole nother subject, which might be too early for this part of the conversation. But that's, we have to sometimes even push to add an extra couple $100 to put in speakers in a ceiling, right?
Yeah, and that's our no compromise. That's the no compromise list is an audio system and some sort of voice lift because...
Sure
we'll compromise on
AV, is it not?
Well,
yeah. So you've simplified AV down to just V.
Yeah.
And so we get arguments from the science people. Well, we don't need to hear things, and I think people forget what the ADA laws and rules are. I'm not going to dive into that right now, but the way I interpret those rules, every system on a college campus that has video should have an audio system. So.
Yeah, take this out if it's going to get Justin super fired, but I increasingly get the impression that that institution sometimes forgets that it has students.
And
because,
there's
our
a
students the
lot
one
of
to take up the
being able
parties
to hear
also
is-
because we've got them too.
It's
There's
like it's
departments
such an
on
important
campus that-
accessibility issue. Like if you can
Oh, I
see
know.
things but you cannot hear them, what do you got? You got
no.
nothing.
Well, they just look at PowerPoint slides. They just look at cell structures.
I can speak
they don't need
loudly. That's my favorite. I
Cell-
speak loud. I speak loud.
Cell
don't need a mic.
meiosis doesn't make noise, right? Meiosis and mitosis and all that crap from my 8th grade biology class. They don't.
How do you know those cells can be screaming?
They could be.
But
Just can't hear
this
'em 'cause there's no
idea
speakers.
that people are going to learn anything from looking at something, from merely looking at it, has been so thoroughly debunked
Oh, yeah.
from a pedagogical standpoint that
We're gonna rebunk
an
that right
educator
now.
would stand up there and be like, "We don't need a sound system," is the most banana shit I've
That's
ever
the
heard.
problem, though.
That is
Rachel,
all.
we
That is
don't-
all false. And any teenage boy will tell you by looking at a magazine, you learn lots.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can read a book and learn all kinds of stuff.
No,
without having
Jamie.
sound.
I look at the magazine for the articles. I want to be very clear.
Actually, Jamie, any
So-
teenage boy now these days will tell you or ask you what's a magazine.
Yeah, what's a magazine? What are you talking about? They came in the mail? Sorry.
So
It's like a web
it's
page that you
problem.
have to turn yourself.
Now, what I'll say to that is, if we build a new building, we are doing cookie cutter classrooms. They're all the same. They all have audio. They're all designed well because you have that funding up front. And then comes the refresh cycle later, which we'll get into. But if we're, for instance, if we go to a room that just has a projector in there and we can recommend everything and the department says, you know what, I don't have that kind of money. We can't force them because our budget isn't centralized. So even though we schedule classes centrally through Astra, and we have what you all would call registrar-owned rooms, we essentially sort of have that, but the rooms are shared only amongst colleges, from what I remember. So, the sciences can share each other's, and then if they allow other departments within that larger area to share, then the dean will throw money at those classrooms. But there's no money, from what I understand, given to the dean specifically for classroom improvement, and IT doesn't really have a say. Well, this building, it's been 10 years since we've touched it. We really need to refresh this. That doesn't happen. We are reactive in the fact that we get a ticket, there's a problem, we go figure out what the problem is, it can't be fixed, that creates a project. Project turns into financial money. Biology or whoever it is can't afford something. Well, we're going against the standard. So our standard classroom, I would say there's probably that equates to less than 50% of our rooms.
Well, before we come back to because I want to really dive into the scheduling and the whose room is whose thing in a few minutes. But
Right.
But before we get into that, we'll go with
Larry.
What Larry has to say. Okay, that was enough. Anyway, sorry, Larry.
Nice. Well, I can say our standard classroom, we don't have any of them on campus yet. Because when I got here, I redesigned it, and we haven't bothered to install any of them yet.
So what did they call it
So
before?
it's a theoretical classroom.
Before
Did they have a standard?
They kind of had a standard, but it was
These were in times before
overly
Larry.
complicated, analog.
BL.
So we've already got a lot of them built. We're waiting till Thanksgiving to start rolling them out. But it's dedicated computer, laptop connection, dot cam, interactive desktop monitor, UC in the room, and a laser projector. The one thing I kind of am different on, I think, than a lot of y'all is we're taking touch panels out, putting keypads in for our
do that.
basic
You-
system.
The button
That's
panel
the
is the
biggest
new touch
reason
panel.
Yep.
That's a whole
we
nother
had to-
discussion.
yeah,
another show.
We actually had to drop the DVD player because of that. We have rental or loaner DVD players for people that need them. But when I was at Butler, we made this change. We saw the classroom emergencies drop by 50% because people are just more comfortable hitting simple buttons on a keypad.
Yeah.
You know what's funny about that? I agree, and most of the departments at Western agree with you, Larry. But I have the sociology department. They love those touch panels, and I don't know
They're
why.
sociopaths.
They just love them. So you have those little groups here and there that, even though you have a basic classroom, which is a button panel standard, no, give me a touch. You want to spend more money? Okay, that's fine. You know.
Are they trying to do something that's fancier? Like, do they have more outre needs, or do they just like that it looks so pretty?
They just.
It's cooler.
They
Check it out.
they say it works better. They say that they like it better. They like the interface that we've developed. It's a pretty clean interface. We don't have a lot of problems out of our touch panels, but you're right. I mean, a button panel to me and most people is a lot easier to use than a touch panel, no matter how the touch panel is designed.
And you can put the
little
same
simple.
logic on the back end of it, so it can still do everything you're used to doing. It's just physical buttons.
Now, let me
Just-
ask you this.
You need
For
the
a
space
basic
area.
system that we can get.
How many buttons do you limit them to? Is it like 8 or a single gain kind of thing, or?
Right now, where I used to love the MPCs
On off.
systems, where I got like 10. I'm back down to 6
Yeah.
or 8 because we're an Extron shop right now. But I mean, really, if you have three or four sources, I'm still waiting to find a wireless presentation system I like for that fourth input.
You and everybody else.
You got
Another
those,
show.
You got power. Yeah, you got power. You got volume, and you got a blank button. That'll do most of your classes.
The blank one just
And
lights
for-
up. It's a therapy button. Just keep banging it till it does something.
Another question for you all. What's
Put
your
the help request button on it, it just blinks.
What's your design approach for button panel in a standard classroom with a wireless microphone? Does that force you to a touch panel situation, or you keep a button panel in there for that, or how does that work?
What do you mean? As far why would the microphone?
Because
because if you have 8
allow
buttons-
you allow them to
Right. Allow
the
to
end user
manipulate the
control.
microphone.
Oh, you're letting them
correct.
change level? No.
Oh
Take
no,
that away.
no,
No, we don't
no
do
way.
that.
Because if we don't, we'll get tons of tickets that, hey, the microphone's too loud, too soft, it doesn't matter. And then so we've
it
had
away,
to
move
actually
it closer.
create some systems where they have a mini console underneath where you can do advanced audio and individually control every microphone, and then also have a master mute.
Let's go
And that's
back
for
to
our-
What if you mounted some knobs on their lectern that don't do anything?
But that's
It's
not a
labeled
standard
microphone
classroom.
level.
yeah.
That's-
Let's go
Yeah.
back.
We're getting
like
out of the standard class.
Yeah.
Closed
We can go
elevator
back to-
door of microphone controls.
What was Rachel's example? The crotch microphone. What was that one?
Oh yeah, the
Yeah.
lanyard crotch mic
From the
that
other
just
day.
Right.
hangs around your neck and points at the
And
CD
it-
stands.
So, but that's
There
away
is-
from standard.
Yeah.
There is one other odd thing about our standards. Our standard classroom is defined by class hours, which can change from semester to semester. So if a department decides that this particular lab will get 2 credit hours scheduled in it this year, all of a sudden it gets on the replacement cycle.
So does that mean you have to
That's-
rip out equipment every semester?
No, they can pull
Okay.
it back the next year and put it back on in 7 years when the replacement's back on again. It's
That's-
an odd system.
What?
That's interesting.
We've had departmental
Yeah.
spaces do that where it's a fully departmental space, and they really don't. They have funding. I mean, everyone's got funding if they really do it, but they don't want to pay for it. So all of a sudden, it becomes a generally scheduled room for like a semester or two, and
Until
then
it
pull
gets refreshed, and then you know what? We
Yep.
need that space back.
We need that
Oh,
back.
we want to
Yeah.
use
Ours
that.
again.
That's great.
It happens
Yeah.
all the time. So.
That's a con.
So I'll do real quick here as far as our standard classrooms. The closest thing we have packages. So we have package ABC sort of thing, and we quickly package A we're really good about kind of staying to, and this is something we share across multiple campuses. Very limited as far as just your standard sources: PC, laptop input, wireless presentation. Though as a caveat, right, we're getting rid of that because of licensing and ongoing cost. And Larry, to your comment, trying to find one that we're happy with. We are begrudgingly happy with our current solution, but it's very expensive for what it does. And you look at all the fancy features that people use, and what they really do is they just want to mirror their screen. It's like, well, hey, you know what? We can do that through Zoom now, and everyone who's online can see it too. So problem solved. So that's going to be our kind of Band-Aid solution moving forward until we find a better one. We're actively looking at other solutions. But anyway, so wired and wireless laptop, dedicated PC, kind of to the same point that we were discussing earlier. Then it's people may have laptops, they may not, but at least we know the computer in the room is going to work because we put it there and we maintain it. Blu-ray player, though that is something that it's not on all of them, but it's on most of them. And to the control thing, yeah, there's a button that says Blu-ray and here's a remote sort of thing. Please don't take that because now you can't do anything. Generally single display for most of those rooms. The package Bs can get a little more complex. They're going to have a bigger switcher. They're going to have a little more audio processing. They can support multiple displays and that sort of thing, but we pretty well limit to that. Our biggest hurdle we found from a couple years ago when we first started implementing these, and Larry, much like you were describing, I know you shared this up at IUPUI, that the IU was really kind of the wild, wild west depending on when it was put in and who put it in as far as how it was done. So a couple of years ago, trying to implement these systems or designing and implementing these systems, we cut back a little too far on the package A's, and the earlier ones really had limited audio capability. So when it comes around time to say, hey, let's add microphones in the room, So now we're putting in a little outboard microphone mixer so we can at least get a couple of mics in the room, a couple of ceiling mics, or maybe a lav if we need that. So we can get a little bit of kind of basic audio capability in. So at least you're able to participate in the UCC, in the online classes, in lecture capture and things like that. So that's helped. The larger systems had that capability from the beginning, so that's not so much an issue. Though now what we're doing is obviously way more on let's make sure we have good microphones in the room. Let's make sure we have good audio in the room. The big fight right now is cameras, because there's still a big, and I'm happy to take suggestions if you guys have it, there's still a big gap between the really basic webcam on the top of the monitor, or as Mark and I once described it, the really nice professional grade $150 webcam. Yeah. Went all out on that one. But from there to, even basic PTZ, you're taking a jump up to like the $700, $800, $900, $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, $5,000 camera systems, which are great, but that's a huge bump. Now, when you have specialized CARES fundings and things like this, it's easy to say, let's start throwing those in rooms as best we can, because we need them now, and that's great for the rooms that get those. But some rooms have, if it's a smaller space, it may just have the webcam on top. You spin around and aim at the class, and that's kind of terrible, but it is what it is. Other rooms have more capability beyond that. There are some of these, like I mentioned, some of the earlier spaces that don't have really solid audio pickup in the room. Some of these spaces may right now have, here's a webcam with a mic that you can kind of be picked up within about a 6-foot radius around the lectern, and that's what we're going to do for now. And yes, we're actively working on things, and et cetera, et cetera. And people are generally pretty forgiving on that because circumstances have changed from, say, 2017 to now. But it is something that we're seeing that, hey, we need to make sure we have good audio and good audio routing capability in these spaces. So we need to grow that basic system just a little bit. Unfortunately, there was a big push a couple of years ago to modernize as many learning spaces on campus as part of the bicentennial for the university, which sadly was this year, so it kind of sucked because there wasn't anybody here for it. So they had all sorts of events planned, which didn't happen for some reason. Anyway, so as part of that, there was funding to do some of this, but part of that was here's a X amount of funding, spread it as far as you can, and I think it was spread a little too thin on the audio side, and we're finding that out, so we have to kind of go back and retrofit some of these spaces. And as we all know, doing something right the first time versus doing something right the second time obviously costs more money, so that's one of the big challenges. But as far as a standard classroom, that's kind of how these look, and we get all over the place as far as you want to do active learning, or we've got departmental spaces. And what we try to do, though, kind of as Justin was talking about, we try to say, well, here's our standard package. It's going to have this at least, and we may grow from there. But we're going to try to maintain those capabilities. So even if it's using, for the AV nerds, it's using a different switching system or a different DSP or a different microphone. The instructors, they don't care, but the capabilities are roughly the same. And as many of you mentioned, and I'm glad this came up because I didn't think about it, but this push for, or this movement towards, not a push for, but a movement towards button panels over touch panels, we're doing the same sort of thing. In these basic rooms, we found that to do 4 or 5 sources and basic on-off control, volume up, down, even if there are mics in the room, and no, we don't let them adjust those, we set those mics. A button panel is great. Button panels are easier to support. They're cheaper to install. You still have the same remote capabilities. The interfaces don't change as much. You can order custom buttons or make custom labels depending on how you want to do it. All the manufacturers have them. And same thing, those support calls went way down because it's not a different sort of touch panel that, hey, 3 years ago we used this scheme and now the new ones use this one. It's a little bit different. And that was a big push that we made as well, was trying to standardize that general interface. So even though there may be different capabilities from room to room from the standpoint of maybe this room has a second computer in it, or this room has an old VCR for something, or this room has some specialized audio equipment because they teach the history of rock and roll, very cool class, by the way, the interface will be very similar. So someone walking in there may go, oh, this button's a little bit, okay, I can figure this out. And they're in 90 seconds, they're off and going. It's not they're not presented with something entirely new. It's kind of like that thing where you rent a car at the airport, you go out, you get in the car and you spend the first 10 minutes trying to figure out how the hell do I A, turn on the headlights, and B, turn off this god-awful music that the last person left on there. And it's an entirely new experience every single time. And yeah, windshield wipers, because usually you arrive and it's 10 o'clock at night and your flight was late and it's raining, and good luck with that. So we're trying to avoid that sort of scenario. So I think it sounds like we're all experiencing kind of like some commonalities here, but with different approaches. So
I want to talk about kind of where your standards came from, and some of that may be budget, and kind of I can talk a little bit about our model out here. We went through a lot of expansion in the 2000s, and a lot of retrofitting, remodeling, and growth in the university. But going into it, we didn't have, a menu of standard options. We had, we were just had a bunch of analog rooms still, and then we started doing a lot more cookie cutter. But it wasn't the fact that, okay, we have a spreadsheet with all this hardware. As much as it is, we kept getting asked from project managers, we're doing a building that's going to have 25 classrooms. How much is it going to cost? Mm-hmm. And that was the needs analysis, right? We're doing 25 classrooms. What's in a classroom? And so I was like, okay, well, and it was really purely budget exercise. Dealing with project
you can
management.
save some of your network costs.
Yeah, exactly. And so we said, okay, well, it'd be nice if we just had a standard approach, at least for whatever these 25 classrooms that we haven't seen. We haven't even seen a drawing for it, but I guess this would be the standard deliverable for that space. And so we started one that worked well, and then we're like, oh, well, we want to do a mix of rooms now. It's like, oh, okay, so now we're going to go back and make a couple other ones. And it really was just at a budget exercise with project managers that we created any standards whatsoever. And then we just got to a point where, well, let's just review these every even year and we'll find out what's coming and adjust them accordingly. But now we've shared it with the project managers, so they're just like, okay, they know what to ask for budget up front based on the standards, right? Here's the tool, and we'll just drag and drop in there, and we can create a somewhat realistic budget expectation for a project. And I think that's where ours came from. It wasn't the truest needs analysis, and it kind of grew organically, just kind of what project managers wanted to see.
Ours was a lot on...
that's exactly where ours came from. It was back when I was at Butler University, they did an 8-year replacement cycle, and we needed to project 5 or 6 years in the future what our costs would be. And so we ended up having to standardize our rooms into 2 or 3 different types. And it was just that budget example. And I stole part of what I did at Butler, then part of what I did at IU, and that's how I came up with our current one. Jamie, you were about to say?
Give that stuff back.
Yeah. That was proprietary. Anything you did at the university before you is part of, it's their property, and you just stole it. Intellectual thief. Something nobody ever accused me of is being an intellectual thief. Back in the 90s...
Anybody wants to take credit for any of my ideas?
Hey, you called us the SuperFriends. There, we gave you one.
Yeah.
One.
Credit.
Single. But
That's
back in the 90s...
That's my one good one.
At our school, they implemented a new student IT charge, right? Student technology fee. And as part of that, the registrar took over all the classes, and they started outfitting them. And this was all the analog AMX. And they really started doing this. And our prefaces... Help me out, language people.
We'll give you
Premises,
premises, whatever.
I understand what you mean. You can make up words. I get it.
Yeah, I'll just throw it out there.
Pontificate.
I knew you
Pontius
guys.
Pilate.
I knew you would help me. Well, be careful; he'll stab you in the
Not a
neck.
word yet.
But what happened was it was the transition from analog to digital. That's what did it for us. is that we got in a situation where, because we already had 170 rooms, most of them were already equipped with analog systems with AMX touch panels and all these things. The teachers had kind of started to get used to this. And the student fees had started getting to a point where there was extra money, whatever that means, right? But we'd reached this kind of happy ground. And we sat down and was like, okay, well, we need to start transitioning away from VGA. And although I hear it's coming back.
VGA is on the rise. It's a thing.
VGA is coming back. Kind of like records.
Hey, technology is cyclical.
Kind of like vinyl. But the convergence, literally. So we took a look at this and we said, well, what are we going to do? Because a full-on, I mean, imagine, 8 years ago, a full-on digital switching system for 8 inputs, 2 outputs. I mean, this is expensive. And so we had to find this medium, this middle ground, and we went through a lot of tests, and that's when we came up with the tiered system. It's something as small as tier 1 was we hang and bang projector, TV, and a wall plate, and you're done, to custom, right? Tier 5, 6, 7, 8. But that's when we really decided that we needed to have these standards. And what did we see coming forward over the next 5 years? We also, at this point, that's when the budgeting came in. It says, well, we can't just keep depending upon one-time money every 15 years to change stuff, right? We can't depend on that. We're going to go out, we're going to do all 170 rooms. We're going to do it over the next 7 years so that you're only doing a seventh of your rooms every year. And you're getting them updated. Now, that means some places are going to be analog for the next 7 years, but attrition, building and just construction attrition, the movement of offices and classrooms and whatever, usually takes away enough that it doesn't matter. That eventually the new building money comes in. We're going to renovate that building. Oh, great, because we have 15 rooms in there that we wanted to throw away anyway. And so we did this, and we came up with, we're going to throw them away anyway. And so that's when we came up with the tiered system. That's when we came up with these standards. And we tried to be forward thinking when we did that so that we didn't get caught in this bubble right now of, oh my God, everything's digital. You can't buy a laptop with an analog output on it. What do we do? Mm-hmm. Right? We didn't want to be caught with our pants down there. And so that's what led to our standard packages. What it has done, consequently, is help with all the other things you guys have discussed, right? We can now go to these project managers and say, hey, look, the standard tier 3 that everybody's used to is $26,000 to $28,000, depending on, size, right? Because if it's a big room with a big screen, you need a bigger projector. But we're in there, right? We're in that ballpark. And if you want the push button model, this is what it is. And if you want the glamour, then you're going to have to let us custom, do that. And the experience, whether it's a touch panel or push button, we try to make that the same throughout. But that's kind of what the genesis was. And now it's really paid off because by trying to forward think, and at the time it was VoIP. That's what we were forward thinking to at the time. And we really pushed hard. We got pushback when we first proposed these new standards because we wanted to get, we use BiAmp, right? So we wanted to get the Tessera Fortes with the VoIP card in it. And I said, well, no, that's ridiculous. And then the first college shooting happened, right? And they said, well, how do we get out emergency alert to all the classrooms?
Ding, ding,
Ta-da!
ding.
And so it paid for it all. Boom, done, right? Now, that was a very unfortunate circumstance that led to, the decision we wanted. And now, here we are. We have AEC in every classroom. We don't really need the VoIP, but the USB comes in real handy right now. And so those were the things that led us to where we are. And all the other benefits fell into place, but it had really nothing to do with money at the time. And for us, having 200 rooms that are centrally scheduled, I'm not playing with anybody else's money, right? I'm playing with the registrar, the IT, the infrastructure money. Some years it's there. Some years we have too much. Some years we don't have enough. But it all actually breaks even. Most of our special spaces that we're not covering in this discussion, they're all project-based. they're all departmentally owned. That's all one-time money from somewhere else. And if the law school wants to redo their courtroom, they pay for it, but they use it. It's theirs. So these general classrooms, I don't have to deal with the stuff some of you guys do because it comes out of the IT budget. Therefore, it's our problem, and we have a refresh cycle. And I don't have to worry about, does Department A or B, are they getting in a shouting match because somebody got 2 more hours than the other? Right now, 90% of them aren't being used. Don't care. We're going to replace 2 or 3 of them, right? Because it's their turn.
Hey, Jamie, I got a question for you. Of those 200 classrooms, are the majority of those in that $26,000 to $28,000 range?
There's about 170 of them that are right in there.
Wow. Okay.
That's double.
Yeah, 'cause
that's double our price.
But
we're
they're
coming in
full
right at
kits,
15
right?
to 16.
But if you think about it, I mean, we have the full-blown DSPs in all of them. We have the digital
DSPs,
matrix.
UCC, and
Yeah, UCC. We have the extra cameras. We have extra microphones. We have all of these things that for some people are bonuses, right? And for us, in a lot of cases, look, it's overkill. It's overkill. It absolutely is overkill. I'm not trying to blow smoke here. I mean, we didn't need to put any of that stuff in most of these spaces. But I'll be damned, right now, we look like geniuses, right? Because we did it. And we had the funds.
Ours used to be in that price range, but because of that, we weren't ever able to. Our special spaces are still general inventory classrooms, and because the majority of our classrooms are coming in at that $26,000 range, there was never any money to do any cool active learning spaces or anything like that. So it was basically a directive that we got to get our classrooms cheaper.
Yeah, and
in order to free
and
up
we have
funds.
some lower cost ones, but what this has allowed, the 26 to 28 and those 170s, is how many of you, when you lower the cost, also lower the lumens on your projector? How many of you are also, maybe lowering your amplifiers or lowering, you're making concessions somewhere else to make that price, right?
Remove functionality, right? Yeah.
Or maybe you're using lamps instead of lasers because you can save $2,500. I mean, if you look at now, just laser projectors have decreased by about 40% over the last 5 years.
Laser
Way
projectors,
more
spec
than
to spec, are actually cheaper than bulb projectors right now.
Yes, right
We
now.
ran a study.
Yep, but 4 years ago, 5 years ago, when I started putting them in,
They weren't. Yeah.
now
Correct.
that same $26,000 right now gets you 2 PTC cameras and the auto switching, right? Same money.
Things are cheaper.
But now it gets you a little bit more.
Yep.
We can do it
I
cheaper
think it's
now.
the camera and the DSP is where we're not.
So that's
And that's where, like I said, the basic package we have has real basic audio routing, but no capability really to add that. So that's where we're kind of boxed in. That the transmitter switcher can only do so much. So because we didn't go the extra $2,200 for a full DSP or even a cheaper one at $800 or $900, you're kind of boxing yourself in there. So that's exactly right. When you bring that cost down by saying I'm not going to do XYZ feature because they probably don't need it. Sometimes that works out well for you, but sometimes we're all now kind of running around scrambling trying to get mics back in the room where Jamie's just, hey, look, done.
Yeah,
look, we've had several instances
have DSP.
I've literally taken because most of them are 8x4s, right? Most of them are 8x4 video switchers, right? Plus, you guys know what the biamp is. But I've literally gone in and take out the desk and rolled it into a bigger room, and I can now facilitate 4 displays, right? So 2 projectors, whatever. And I didn't have to change anything. I just moved it.
And so that's where our standards came from is more of an educational piece from myself to all of my bosses in the past 10 years. And, so I'm not going to get super fired for this because the people that would be affected by this aren't even at the university anymore. So my biggest problem creating a standards, my directive was create 4 standards for classrooms. That's it. That was my directive. I said, okay, that's fine. So in my head, I'm like, well, what's the size of the classroom? Does that matter? So I kind of sampled the sizes of the classrooms, and I was like, once we get up to 40 by 40, 50 by 50, you really need a microphone, right? So, that's just a very generic statement. So that's how I scaled my levels. Level 1, basic. Level 2, a little bit more. Level 3, maybe a second display, maybe more speakers, microphones, and so on and so on. Because what they're trying to get to is a price per square foot, because that's how architects budget, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, yeah, but we just finished 2 classrooms for the nursing department, and that was $150,000. And it's standard, but there's 4 displays, right? It can do Zoom. It got cameras. It's got microphones. It's got all of that stuff. It's got confidence monitors, but it's the same standard functionality. So when we talk about standards, we have to, at my college, we have to know the sizes of the rooms, at least in some kind of generic form, because what I'm actually being asked is not a standard. It's an actual price or a cost.
Yeah, you're being asked price per square foot, which is a whole different.
Exactly.
It should be like price per functionality, right? Like that's
price per
functionality.
Square foot has burnt me before.
But right, and it probably will in AV because, the nursing, we have 2 classrooms, that's $150,000. What's that price per square foot? So it's what are you trying to do to create standard classrooms? Is your goal to get pricing information out to other people and higher ups? Is it to create a standard functionality so that all of your faculty, no matter where they go, can operate the same? Or is it all of the above? And so that's been our problem the past 10 years is just educating people on how AV exponentially expands in a space, as well as creating that standard that's easily talked about in front of people that don't really know AV, right?
Well, and support too. I mean, that's one of the biggest driving factors for our standards is we use students to support them. It's a whole lot easier for the students to be able to talk about a type of system, a package B or a package A.
Well, your tool sets are only good for your standards. You can't be held accountable for things you don't know about, right? And I think the support is a huge part of it because for us, we've had colleges capitulate and say, you know what, and we were going to do our thing, but we just want whatever the standard, academic technology package is because we want you to support it in the end.
Right.
And we've had people say, we will buy one of your standard packages as well, as long as it fits underneath that support model because
we're going to buy you. You live over here now.
I mean, it's scalable. Like your support has to scale with your system types.
We also found
finally, as of recently to the standard discussion, we have now gotten to more of a let's talk about standard functionality, and then based upon the specific room, we'll give you some estimates. Very quick estimate. 20 grand, 15 grand, 25 grand, 50 grand. Something that's a not to exceed number that they can work with their budgeting people on, right?
Yeah. We've also found that with our package, we can roll it into almost any space and make it work with the exact same gear, right? Whether you have to add one display or not. The other part, inventory. Break fix inventory. Look, I know that I have 220 DSPs.
Hot swap.
And I only need 3 of them on the shelf. Right?
Well,
and they're all the same, no matter where I go.
Yeah, and it's the partner relationships too. If you get all your stuff from a couple of vendors, they're going to work with you a little bit if you run out of something.
Really? How's that work? Show idea. We'll come back to that
Vendor
one.
maintenance.
So what's your
and this all does lead to
model look
much
like?
larger.
What's that, Justin?
I was just asking what everybody's sparing model looks like. Percentage wise, if you have 500 boxes of X, do you base that on a percentage? So if you have 500, you need 5 or 10, or just as long as you have one.
As soon as I have at least 10 of something, I'll have one spare. But it's not
it's
exponential.
a 10 to 1 ratio.
Yeah,
It's
no.
not
It's just
exponential. Okay.
I won't have a spare until I get 10 of something, roughly, and then at that point I'll have a spare of that. But I'm not going to stock
and then
duplicate
evaluate from
one-offs.
there.
Mine is purely scientific. I take a rough ass guess of how long it's going to last and how reliable it is, and then I prognosticate how many times I'm going to break it, and then I come up with a very scientific formula that says 1.
Mm-hmm.
That seems like calculus.
But we do have kind of like Mark. If I have more than 10, I will have at least one available. if I know it's a routinely broken thing, then we will keep extras. But like amplifiers, shoot, even the DSPs, I have 200 out there. I have 2 on the shelf, right? Because I just never replace them. Now I have this little video switch that breaks down all the damn time, and I've got 12 of them.
You stop buying
right?
it.
It's just
Stop buying that.
Well, I'd love to.
It's hard to change that standard.
It really is. It's a plug and play kind of thing, and we all look. Every company you buy from, they have that one product that you bought into, and now you're stuck.
Yep.
And
Total
that's
cost of
the
ownership.
one.
Seemed good at the time. Seemed so good at the time. But
And we are
thought you
starting-
had the impossible business triangle: cheap, fast, and good. And boy, were you!
Yeah, we're starting to make our way away from some of those things, but there or user stuff that the users touch. Moving parts, DVD players never lasted forever.
Right.
Touch screens, really, they seem to be in bunches, right? Like they'll last for 10 years, and then I'll lose 20 of them all in a year. It's really weird. They're like lemmings. They all throw themselves off the desk at the same time. It's weird.
It also depends heavily, especially touch panels, on the model and the line. Some of those are much more reliable than others. I mean, I remember 30% failure rates on a specific line. I was like, we'll never buy those again. So, well, anyway, so this is a wide ranging conversation. This is not something we're gonna fully define today, and it's something that's going to come up, and it also touches a lot of different aspects of AV and e-learning and higher education in general, as to how we deal with these support models and how you deal with the budgeting and how you deal with identifying necessary feature sets versus what do they actually need in a space versus what they think they need in a space, and then who's paying for that, and how are we supporting that, and who do I call when this doesn't work. So these are all kind of intertwined and interrelated, and something to get people thinking about. The next thing I'd like to think about is we need to take a quick break for a sponsor message.
Pay those bills.
Do you have a question for the AV Super Friends, a topic to suggest, or were we just really, really wrong on something and you'd like to give us a piece of your mind? Well, don't just yell at your computer. Send us an email and we'll actually read it. Mailbag@avsuperfriends.com. We're always looking for good ideas to steal, discuss openly. And if your message is just full of great stuff, we might just invite you on the show. Mailbag@avsuperfriends.com.
I got a lot of problems with you people. Now, you're going to hear about it.
And now, an angry rant.
Hey, manufacturers, why don't you make a more consistent size of products that mount well onto the rack shelves? Why do we have to cover your stuff in Velcro just so it doesn't slide around? And we just want to mount them in a rack. And while I'm at it, stop it with the wall wart power supplies. They never fit anywhere. Put PoE in the network port and a network port so I can monitor it. Which also reminds me, if it has a LAN port, there better be a set of commands that let me control that device. Too many displays don't let you control them over LAN. It's only to be used for apps or streaming. Nobody wants it anyway. Sincerely, the reader.
Well, we've managed to ruin yet another episode of AV Super Friends Off the Rails. You can contact us with questions, topic ideas, or general complaints at mailbag@avsuperfriends.com. If you complain loud enough, we might just invite you on the show.
Nice work, everyone. Sharp broadcast. Really good. Everyone on the floor as well. Really a lot of hustle. I liked it.
The opinions expressed by the AV Super Friends are solely those of the individuals and do not represent their respective institutions, organizations, companies, or clients.